you remember how many times you experienced the same pain? You were wounded by the same words. You attracted the same type of people. You gave up at the same point. It feels as though life plays the same scene over and over, yet each time you tell yourself this time will be different. It isn't, because even though you changed, your perspective remained the same. Because while your mind holds on to what was, your heart cannot call for what is new. And perhaps this cycle is not your enemy at all. According to spiritual metaphysics, time is not a straight line. Each moment resembles another, but is not the same. You repeat because you mistake one for the other. This is the key that unlocks the soul, because life does not always offer the same thing. But if you always look from the same place, you will believe everything is the same. The vicious cycle does not exist in the outer world. It lives in the inner map you have created for yourself. You cannot reach a new place without abandoning your old path. And if you walk the same road with the same emotion, the result does not change. In psychology, this is called repetition compulsion. A person relives an emotion they could not resolve in childhood repeatedly throughout their life, with different names, different faces, but the same feeling, because the brain wants to close unfinished stories. But according to spiritual metaphysics, your cycle is not only psychological, it is also an existential calling. If you are brought to the same place again, there is a test there. You face the same trial, but flee each time, either with anger, with stubbornness, or with denial, and then you return to the beginning, because that trial comes not from your breath, but from your guidance, and you have not yet come to know that guidance. According to spiritual metaphysics, each moment manifests with new guidance. But if you do not recognize that guidance, you mistake every moment for a repetition of the last. Yet every day is a new creation. Your eyes, fixed on the past, cannot see this creation. Your ego feeds on the past. It repeats the same emotions, offering you an illusion of control. But your spirit wants freedom, not repetition, but transformation. Yet transformation begins with recognition. If you still think in the same patterns, the cycle cannot be broken. Think of time as a circle. Every morning you start from the same point, but the circle can expand. As long as you remain at the same center, you cannot step outside the circumference. The vicious cycle, though often painful, is familiar, and the familiar appears like a comfort zone. The unknown frightens. This is why people hesitate even to release what hurts them, because they fear new pain. But according to spiritual metaphysics, your cycle is not merely psychological, it is also an existential summons. Everything that passes through you carries a purpose for you, and that purpose is not only to test you, but also to open an exit door for you. Psychology calls this schema repetition cycle. A person unconsciously relives the fundamental belief they formed in childhood. Someone who believes they were unloved draws themselves toward people who will not love them. Someone with abandonment fears rekindles this feeling in every relationship. But according to spiritual metaphysics, it is not your schema that dominates. It is your guidance. You do not live under a belief, but under the shadow of a guidance, and that shadow shapes your direction. Every shadow is born from light. If you live in shadow, you have turned your back to light, so every repetition occurs when you turn away from your guidance. When you remember your guidance, the shadow dissolves. Rumi uses the compass metaphor here. One leg of us is fixed, the other rotates. But the fixed leg is guidance. The further you move from that leg, the harder the rotation becomes. The cycle tosses you about. But when you approach the fixed point, everything calms. Your emergence from the cycle begins when you turn toward guidance. When you befriend that guidance, the same event no longer shakes you, because you have come to know it, because you carry its meaning in your heart. And now that guidance is not your enemy, but your guide. A woman constantly felt worthless. Her relationships were short. Her friendships remained superficial. Then she prayed from within, "Show me I am worthy in your eyes." And a guidance fell into her heart. From that moment, her life changed. She no longer sought approval from people, but began to seek the value in her own heart. And people changed, because her perspective changed. A guidance can fall into your heart too, but for that, you must first be silent. Silence is not waiting. Silence is stilling the noise within, because noise silences guidance, and when you silence guidance, you push yourself into darkness. According to spiritual metaphysics, when you do not know your guidance, you become distant from yourself. And as you distance yourself, you repeat your life. So you are not enslaved to the cycle. You are enslaved to your own distance. The moment you know your guidance, even the same event appears different to you, because you have changed. Now you look from within, and one who looks from within does not see repetition in the outer world. You want to escape, but there seems to be an invisible boundary. You make a decision, you take a step, and life pulls you back to the same place. It feels as though you carry a weight that is not yours. A voice whispers from within, "This time I will succeed." But another voice, more familiar, quickly follows, "You said that before. What has changed?" This is where surrender begins, because to emerge from a cycle, striving alone is not enough. Where you recognize you cannot escape, you must surrender. According to spiritual metaphysics, one who seeks to escape flees from themselves. One who surrenders remains in themselves and finds their guidance there. This sentence shows that the cycle is not merely chaos, but also a mirror. The place you return to is meant to show you yourself. But if you still try to flee from there, you have not changed your perspective. Surrender is not submission to events. Surrender is choosing to remain with guidance, because you still grapple with the question of why. Why does everything repeat? Why this pain again? Why me? But one who surrenders asks, "What is this repetition telling me? What guidance is looking at me here? What am I not facing in this cycle?" Sometimes the cycle is a person, sometimes a habit, sometimes a thought. You simply want it to end. But it is possible that what you're trying to end is how guidance speaks to you. Rumi says, "What you flee from, you will be tested by, because you're called not from what you fear, but from what you have forgotten." Your cycle may be the echo of a guidance you have forgotten. You flee from it while it approaches you. The meaning of prayer changes here, because you no longer seek, you only open, you expand your heart. You pray to change not your circumstances, but your sight. You no longer say, "Save me from this pain." You say, "Let me understand what this pain is teaching me." And that is where the cycle begins to unravel. According to spiritual metaphysics, when the concept of manifestation is explained, we say this: each moment manifests with new guidance. If you cannot see that guidance, it sends the same guidance in other forms. This is why what you experience repeatedly is the multiplication of a sign. You try to read it in the old way so it does not open a new direction for you. But if one day you choose not just to look, but to see, the same sentence carries different meaning. The same face shines with different light. The same event no longer shakes you, because in that moment you have changed, because there has been a shift at your center. And nothing but this inner shift breaks the outer cycle. Psychologists speak of awareness, observing your thoughts, watching your reactions, recognizing the old paths in your mind. According to spiritual metaphysics, this can be called something else: inner observation. That is, knowing that guidance observes you, you observe yourself with its gaze. This awareness does not solve the cycle, but it softens your resistance. And the softened heart opens space for guidance. What you must fight is not the repetition you experience. What you must fight is your insistence on the same perspective, because that insistence narrows your heart. And a narrowed heart cannot carry guidance. A man kept falling into debt. He worked, but could not seem to get ahead. Then he listened to a teaching. He heard the name of a guidance, the sustainer. He learned that abundance is not only material, but a state, a perspective. That day, he began to give thanks. Did wealth come immediately? Number. But within the same debts, he began to live with peace, because he no longer looked at the cycle, he looked at guidance, and gradually everything changed. But first, his perspective changed. Surrender is sometimes only to speak this sentence: "O guidance, I return to the same place because I have no other door." There is no exhaustion in this sentence. There is acceptance. Where your effort ends, your return to your guide begins. According to spiritual metaphysics, when you step out of yourself, it returns to you. Because you always wanted to solve, yet some things are not solved. They are passed through, lived, witnessed, and finally accepted into their place. What you call your cycle may be the solution itself. While you try to escape it, it tries to show you its guidance. And when you finally look, everything falls into place. Rumi says, "Water passes over the same stone 1,000 times. But one day, the stone takes shape. Your heart is that stone. Every repetition you experience is the water that comes to carve you. The cycle does not break. The cycle does not dissolve. The cycle is remembered. What you repeat is not life. It is a forgotten guidance. And until you remember that guidance, the same trial comes again, in different forms, different faces, but with the same calling. According to spiritual metaphysics, whatever a person is closed to, life tries to open from there. You are closed in your heart, because the heart is not the center of the cycle, it is the mirror. Until you see in that mirror, everything you experience repeats itself. A door knocks, always at the same time, always with the same question. Again? You say, yes, again. Because the answer was not given, because the turning did not happen. You try to silence that sound, but that sound is there to make you speak with your guide, to call you inward, to show you yourself. Rumi says, "One who knocks repeatedly does not wish to enter. They call for someone inside to open. What you believe comes from outside. Your cycle may be a calling from within. The more you try to suppress it, the stronger it becomes. Because every suppressed feeling covers a guidance, and as that covering thickens, the cycle lengthens. When the heart closes, time also closes. Continuity breaks. The moment turns back on itself. According to spiritual metaphysics, when the heart opens to guidance, it expands. But when it closes to its own ego, it narrows. A narrowed heart turns time into a cycle, time actually flows, but if your heart has stopped, time itself becomes stuck with you, and there, guidance waits for you, your own guidance, the guidance that gives you breath, the guidance that shapes your direction. But if you still look at another, follow another's path, imitate another's pain, that guidance becomes invisible. And not only invisible, it becomes silent until you speak, until you turn, until you return to yourself. Psychology calls this loss of self-compassion. A person forgets to treat themselves kindly and continually relives the errors of the past because they still hear the voice that remains in the past. You made the same mistake. You failed again. You are just like that. According to spiritual metaphysics, there is another way to understand this. Concealment, that is, concealing your own value, beauty, balance, mercy, and replacing them with guilt, shame, fear. The heart becomes illuminated as it witnesses guidance. Do not look at yourself. Look at your guide. What you repeat is actually your perspective of yourself. If you still tell yourself you are inadequate, sinful, weak, the cycle will bring you the same reflections. But if one day you ask not only who am I, but also what is my guidance, then that guidance becomes visible to you and the cycle falls silent. There was a story of a woman. She was constantly abandoned. Whenever she began a relationship, she felt it would end at the same point. And it did. One day she listened to a teaching. She heard, "The highest love appears in the heart that loves itself." She stopped. She wept. She realized she had never loved herself. She realized she had constantly betrayed her own love, and from that day she remembered that she carries this guidance. Did she change? Yes. But first, her interior changed. Then the cycle ended. Because according to spiritual metaphysics, the cycle is not a punishment. It is a warning, a sign, a calling. Every guidance has an echo. And until you hear that echo, the voice of that guidance continues to resound. What resonates in your life? Which event? Which person? Which pain? What guidance is whispering to you? And if you still insist on not hearing that voice, the cycle continues. What is the solution? Where is the liberation? In the place where your heart opens, in the place where your heart becomes still, in the place where your heart begins to listen. Because your greatest enemy is not outside you. It is the conditioning inside. And until you silence it, nothing outside changes. Rumi says, "The heart is a lock, but the key is always within." If you search outside, you are mistaken. If you wait for a rescuer, you delay. Because what will free you from the cycle is the guidance you carry within. And that guidance is a name. According to spiritual metaphysics, the moment you listen to that guidance, the cycle of repetition gives way to awareness. And then you understand, life is not destroying you. It is carving you. It is shaping you. And every blow is the beginning of a transformation.